Hey everybody, I'm Andrew from the Flutter team, and I'm here to talk with you about the past, present, and future of Flutter. How it's gone from an experimental rendering project to a tool used around the world to reduce the time and money required to unlock designers' creativity, help businesses ship fantastic apps, and empower developers to put great experiences into users' hands. What just happened? Hi, I'm not sure what's going on, but we're shooting content for the Flutter community. I'm sorry, are you Rivers Cuomo?
Yeah.
Like lead singer-songwriter for the band Weezer, Rivers Cuomo? Toured the world for decades, millions of records, reinterpreted Aaron Copland for a jaded modern audience, like that, Rivers Cuomo?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, I don't know if you meant to beam yourself, I guess, into a different studio, but we're actually doing a tech live stream for tech folks, software developers.
I am a software developer.
You are?
Yeah. I've shipped 2 applications to support my life and work as an artist.
Oh, okay. Well, this stream is specifically about Flutter, though, so...
I build with Flutter.
You do?
Of course. My users are on more than one platform, so I need to be too. Flutter seemed like the safe choice. There are more than 1 million published Flutter apps with hundreds of millions of users and billions of dollars moving through them.
Am I asleep right now?
Plus, I like using it. The cross-platform thing is incredible. I like that I can make a web app first before going on to the difficult deployment to Android or iOS part. And hot reload, amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So we're a 2-person intro now. All right. In the next couple minutes, I need to share some numbers about Flutter and then set the stage for the rest of the content. You want to help?
Oh, yeah. You're doing great, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Supportive community. Okay, so I asked our analytics team to crunch some stats to reflect where Flutter's at these days. And now I guess Rivers and I are going to run some numbers by you. There we go. All right, those are for you. Awesome. All right. So, first number, how old do you think the Flutter project is in years?
Well, I started using it 4 or 5 years ago, and it had been around for a while before that. So I'm going to say 7 years.
Yeah, take a look.
10 years.
10 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, it wasn't called Flutter back then. It was technically called Sky when it was first started. But then they changed the name, and the first commit was a little over 10 years ago.
Whoa.
Yeah. All right, next card. So we say in Flutter, everything's a widget. You may have seen that phrase.
I have.
How many widgets are publicly available out of the Flutter SDK? Like how many are sort of built in?
Oh, geez. I'm going to say more than 100. I would guess less than 200. I'm going to say 200.
Take a look.
Oh my God, 528.
Yes.
I got to learn some widgets.
There you go. Search through the code this morning. Yeah, 528 widgets publicly available in Flutter. Everything from size box to multi-child render object widget. All right, next one. Since the start of this year, how many people have contributed code to Flutter?
I've been to the GitHub and there's a lot of people on there. I'm going to say 1,000?
Take a look.
475.
Yeah, so not quite 1,000, but 475, and that runs from the beginning of the year up until about Halloween.
Okay, wow.
A little follow-on, I don't have a card for this one. How many of those folks do you think were Googlers, folks that actually worked at Google?
150.
119, that's pretty close.
Right on.
All right. Cool, okay. We have a network of meetups called the Flutter Meetup Network. There's local meetups all over the world in different languages. How many countries would you guess are covered by the network of Flutter meetups?
I think it's a lot, because I see so many people from different countries online talking about Flutter. I'm going to say 123.
All right, we're not quite there yet. We have 64.
64.
About 92,000 people, though, are part of the network in 64 different countries. All right, here's a heavyweight stat now. How many people do you think use Flutter every month?
As developers?
So this is, we have analytics that the Flutter tool itself generates. If you ever run Flutter Run or Flutter Create, that uses Google Analytics. How many people invoke the Flutter tool, do you think, every month?
1 million.
Take a look. Over 1 million.
Over 1 million.
Yeah, we measure it in a couple different ways, and we don't know how much over 1 million it is, but it's definitely over 1 million now.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, last one. According to the app analytics firm Apptopia, what percentage of new apps being uploaded to the iOS App Store do you think are built with Flutter?
There's a lot of ways to make apps.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 0.5%.
0.5%.
28%?
28%.
Oh my.
So more than 1 in 4 new iOS apps going up to the App Store are built with Flutter.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. Thank you for agreeing to take a pop quiz in front of several 100,000 people.
My pleasure.
All right. Time to get this party going. Since you're part of the Flutter community now, do you want to introduce the rest of our content?
That would be awesome. Let's see. Over the last decade, Flutter has gone through a few eras. At the start was the experimental era. The whole project was just a few engineers seeing if they could make the web run faster, culminating in the launch of 1.0 in 2018 when Flutter became a stable SDK. In its growth era, Flutter added more supported platforms, with new engineers like moi picking it up, the Flutter community welcoming so many new faces, new packages being published every week, and the ecosystem exploding with new code. Now we're in Flutter's production era. Thanks to its thousands of contributors and millions of developers, Flutter has grown to be something people rely on. And engineering the SDK and tools is more about delivering on Flutter's existing promises and continually improving its awesome developer experience. During this event, we'll talk a bit about all these things, including info about the last couple releases and where things are headed, plus a live Q&A with folks from the team. First up is tech lead and musician Kate Lovett to talk about how Flutter empowers developers to craft incredible user experiences. Widgets, rendering, Cupertino, and a lot of other imports that end up at the top of all my Dart files.
That was great, thanks. Do you mind if I share this selfie with like 30 people I went to school with?
Thanks, Rivers. I thought he'd look more like Buddy Holly. But that aside, he hit the nail right on the head. Part of the reason why so many large companies choose to use Flutter when they need to support users on more than one platform is Flutter's track record of helping developers ship millions of apps with hundreds of millions of users. That same record speaks to a framework that not only helps teams maintain table stakes app functionality over time, but also enables developers to build higher quality and more imaginative app experiences, while simultaneously enabling companies to expend fewer resources to build, test, and launch the app everywhere it needs to be. That's why so many teams that adopt Flutter see an increase in both their App Store rating and key business metrics like ad impressions and in-app purchases. Flutter also frees teams from platform constraints, empowering them to deliver user experiences in line with their strategy and users' needs, whether that's native, entirely custom, or something in between. So how did a few engineers go from trying to make the web faster to introducing a framework for building beautiful apps across multiple platforms? Well, experimentation. That's why we call Flutter's early days the experimental era. Like Rivers so accurately put it, that experimentation culminated in the release of Flutter 1.0, which featured the Cupertino and Material widget libraries so that apps could look and feel right at home on Flutter's debut platforms, iOS and Android. For the folks who weren't quite ready to fully rewrite an existing application, 1.0 also introduced the option of sprinkling Flutter into an existing native app, what we call Add to App. Development orgs all over the world have been leveraging Add to App to introduce new features for years, including the business and consumer app teams at WeChat, one of the world's most popular messaging apps with over 1 billion monthly active users. But that was just the first step in our larger vision to deliver production-grade support for Android, iOS, macOS, Windows, Linux, and the web. Delivering on that vision would come to define Flutter's growth era, a period of time which made clear that our approach and ambition resonated far beyond the Flutter team at Google. Like River said, the ecosystem around Flutter exploded with new faces and code. We expanded support from mobile to web and desktop. The sizes and types of teams willing to bet on an upstart framework with lofty goals grew from individual hobbyist developers and small teams willing to take big bets to startups and small to medium-sized businesses. New design libraries were popping up in the Flutter community to support high-quality UIs for all those users and across all of these platforms, like Fluent Design-inspired Fluent UI, macOS-inspired macOS UI, and the Ubuntu-inspired Yaru widgets. We also added support for new user input methods like Focus and shortcuts for desktop users, Scribble support for Apple Pencil users, and local auth via fingerprint, Touch ID, and Face ID, just to name a few. The bar for quality and fidelity kept rising even higher, as did the number of companies that were choosing to adopt Flutter. So, we made it easier to write and use custom fragment shaders to create graphical effects like the animations that bring human-computer interactions to life. We also upgraded internationalization and worked hard on improving accessibility, especially on the web, ensuring that canvas-rendered elements were understandable and interactive for users of assistive technologies right out of the box. The team working on SNCF Connect, France's public transit app, told us they were able to share 90% of their Flutter code across platforms, reduced their release cadence to just one per week with no delay between iOS and Android, and spent less time monitoring multiple stacks. To hear that kind of feedback from the team working on an app with over 15 million downloads, we figured we were on the right track. As with anything in technology, the platforms themselves evolve at a lightning pace. So we've made it a priority to evolve with them by supporting the latest and greatest features as fast as possible. Over time, that has meant doing things like upgrading the Material library to support Material 3, unlocking more expressive power and customizability, exploring new slivers and two-dimensional scrolling widgets to reach new levels of UI complexity, and building out code generation tools to support seamless integrations with any native API or feature on any platform. Now, Flutter is in its production era, where large enterprises are relying on Flutter to help them deliver on business-critical functions. For example, Scandinavian Airlines, who are filling up their trophy case with design awards while transporting almost 24 million passengers per year. And teams here at Google, like Google Earth, who are relying on Flutter to help users explore our beautiful planet on iOS, Android, and the web, all from a single code base. For the next step in supporting the mission-critical Flutter apps that developers are building and users are relying on, we've shifted our focus to feature completeness and polish across each of our 6 target platforms: iOS, Android, web, Windows, macOS, and Linux. Our goal is for Flutter apps to be virtually indistinguishable from their native counterparts. In the last year, we've focused on platform fidelity. We've released a combination of new and refined Material widgets, improved Cupertino widget fidelity to match the latest iOS design system, added support for Android's predictive back navigation, and expanded embedding capabilities on the web to include multi-element embedding, allowing you to embed as many Flutter views as you'd like within another web application. Our latest release to the stable channel, Flutter 3.27, builds on top of that work. We're making updates to the Material widgets to keep pace with its evolving spec, enabling more dynamic layouts to follow modern app design trends, and implementing the latest features from Android 15, including freeform and edge-to-edge mode by default. In iOS, we're adding support for StoreKit 2 in the in-app purchase plugin, and continuing to improve our library of Cupertino components. It seems a few developers have already noticed. And on the web, you'll see even more improvements to accessibility and visual fidelity. We're landing fixes for headings, dialogues, passwords, the iOS keyboard, links, and scrollables. Development teams working at Supercell and Universal Studios both, coincidentally, reduced their code base size by 45% after using Flutter. More specifically, the Supercell ID team was able to reduce their core code size by 45%, even with the addition of support for desktop. That means both teams managed to cut the lines of code that needs to be reviewed and maintained by nearly half. So instead of spending their cycles maintaining their code base, both teams can focus their time, energy, and resources on the real goal, creating fun and immersive experiences that form lasting memories. Oh, and they may have mentioned that they're fans of Flutter's performance improvements too, which is a great segue because Con will be telling you more about Flutter's performance in the next segment. But before I pass to her, let's take a moment to hear from a team of developers experiencing the benefits of crafting amazing user experiences with Flutter.
Hey everyone, I'm Marcus Ng, and I'm a staff software engineer at Headspace. Over the past decade, Headspace has maintained separate codebases across native iOS, Android, and web. And while this approach has allowed us to provide high-quality experiences across platforms, it has also come at the cost of managing fragmented workflows and duplicate efforts. We began using Flutter back in 2021, and we were very impressed with its performance. We recently decided to take the leap and officially migrate our front-end tech stacks to Flutter, starting with our native iOS and Android apps, and eventually our web app as well. Currently, several of our features built with Flutter are live in the app stores. One of these features is Ebb, which is our AI mental health companion. And another is our direct-to-consumer therapy service that connects users with mental health therapists. We're also leaning heavily into server-driven UI to quickly deliver dynamic and personalized experiences to our users. By defining the structure and behavior of our UI server-side, we can iterate faster, A/B test more, and update our apps in real time. Combined with Flutter, this enables us to seamlessly deliver these experiences across all platforms using a single codebase built around a unified design system. This transition to Flutter marks an exciting new chapter for Headspace. We're incredibly grateful for the innovation and the community behind Flutter, which empowers us to bring mental health support to millions of people all around the world more efficiently than ever before.
Imagine this. You're at the movie theater, but the app is taking a little while to load your ticket. So you hold up the line for the movie that everyone's been waiting months to see. We've all been there. It's frustrating. End users don't care too much about the technology that you use, but a beautiful and elegant app that is slow, janky, and constantly crashing is kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. That beautiful UI is overshadowed and wasted by poor performance. Performance is everything, because bad performance doesn't just hurt your bottom line short term as users get fed up and leave your app, but it also hurts your brand long term when people are sharing negative reviews like this one. Ouch. Flutter has been built to help you deliver apps that not only look and feel good, but also performant and reliable. So reliable, in fact, that Universal Studios saw their app's crash rate drop to less than 0.1% when they switched to Flutter. It's built to go beyond the performance capabilities of what's expected of traditional cross-platform frameworks, ensuring that you never have to worry about your app's stability or speed. Here's how Flutter has and continues to deliver the very best performance on every platform right out of the box. I like this eras thing that we've got going on, so let's start there. In Flutter's experimental era, we made two foundational choices related to performance. First, we bet on Dart, which came with an ahead-of-time compiler enabling Flutter apps to compile to native ARM or x64 machine code. The result? Consistently fast app startup times. Second, we bypassed native UI kits and brought our own rendering layer, leveraging the power of device hardware by talking directly to the GPU. That result? Fast rendering and smooth animations across our two stable platforms at the time, iOS and Android. But as with all technical decisions, there were trade-offs which became all the more apparent as Flutter grew in popularity. For example, how different platforms handle shader compilation. Some defer more work to runtime, which can cause performance issues, leading to dropped frames in the first few seconds of launching an app. So we began to experiment with a number of potential solutions. Some showed promise, others were dead ends. Eventually, we landed on an approach that would keep our original ethos, using our own rendering engine, but this time leaning on the power of modern graphics APIs, like Metal on iOS and Vulkan on Android, for smoother and more predictable graphics performance. We called it Impeller and introduced it to developers back in 2022. For over a year now, Impeller has been the default renderer for Flutter apps running on iOS. Flutter 3.2.7 marks the next step in our Impeller journey. Impeller is now also the default renderer on all Vulkan-enabled Android devices, and don't worry, Android devices without Vulkan support will continue to use Flutter's original rendering engine, Skia. We've run a number of benchmarks and we're really excited about the improvements. Using Impeller, we saw as much as a 97% decrease in max rendering times, and a 100 megabyte reduction in memory usage while running the animation-heavy Wondrous app. Who doesn't love a snappy and smooth user experience? Even more exciting than those numbers are the new possibilities that Impeller unlocks. Earlier in the show, Kate shouted out a Flutter developer who built a cool demo to showcase a significant increase in Flutter's fidelity on iOS. That fidelity will only further improve given the added support for the display P3 color space in Flutter 3.27, meaning that you get to take full advantage of high-definition iOS displays. This work was made possible, at least in part, by the updates we've made to Impeller. Another exciting addition driven by our Impeller work is Flutter GPU, a new low-level graphics API we announced as a preview in early 2024. Flutter GPU gives you access to the machine's GPU from dark code and enables you to build custom renderers for the most complex graphics, including 3D. This development is particularly exciting because it pushes the envelope of what a cross-platform framework is able to do. It empowers teams to craft breathtaking visuals, the kinds that separate your app and brand from the competition. It also streamlines the entire development workflow for your team because they only have one code base to create and maintain, thanks to a single unified graphics API that delivers consistent performance across all devices. Next, let's hop on over to the web. We announced Flutter on the web as a technical preview in 2018 with Flutter 1.0, compiling Flutter web apps to JavaScript and using HTML-based rendering. Once Flutter Web joined mobile in our collection of stable support platforms, we transitioned from HTML to WebGL by using CanvasKit, a WebAssembly-powered engine leading to performance improvements and consistency across Flutter web and mobile apps. CanvasKit uses the Skia rendering engine, which Flutter Mobile also used at the time, giving both web and mobile the same fidelity and rendering behavior. And as Flutter's moved into its production era, we're starting to see some other big bets pay off. Earlier this year, we announced that all code in a Flutter web app can now be compiled to WASM, making Flutter web apps faster than ever. As an experiment, we took the Wondrous app, which is built to demonstrate the richness and performance potential of Flutter on native devices, and ran it on the web. At the 95th percentile, how fast were the slowest frames? Compiling to JavaScript and running it in the browser was nearly 5 times slower. But that was just our first experiment. We then compiled the app using WebAssembly, which cut the difference between web and native in half. As a result, we've stopped asking ourselves, how much faster is WASM than JavaScript? And started asking, how close can we get to native speeds? Which is really perfect timing because as of mid-2024, all plugins developed by the Flutter team are now WASM compatible. As the saying goes, it's always good to eat your own dog food. So we've been using it to power Dartpad and Flutter's API docs. The 3.27 release also introduces an experimental setting to run Dart and Flutter DevTools as a fully WASM-compiled web app. I happened to get my hands on some benchmarks for this new WASM-compiled version of DevTools. Average total frame times are 27% faster, while the outlier averages were significantly reduced as well. All of this brings us to Flutter's support for desktop apps on macOS, Windows, and Linux. In November 2022, we removed OpenGL from the macOS embedder, moving 100% to Metal, a win both for speed and simplicity of the codebase. Fast forward to today, Flutter is delivering the performance users expect from native applications on macOS, Linux, and Windows. It's no surprise that there are millions of users who are depending on experiences powered by Flutter Desktop. One of those experiences was brought to life by Rive. They needed a tool that could handle heavy graphics rendering across multiple browsers and platforms. So they rewrote their Rive editor, an animation tool, entirely in Flutter to enable developers to create beautiful multi-platform illustrations on web, macOS, and Windows. As for upcoming improvements, we're really excited to bring Impeller support to macOS, Windows, and Linux. It's not quite ready yet, but we'll let you know when it lands. So to recap, on mobile, Flutter's investment in Impeller is improving rendering speeds and opening the door to true 3D graphics. Flutter web apps achieve benchmarks usually only possible on flagship phones, and Flutter desktop apps are as performant as their native counterparts. We're excited to see how Flutter can help you on the journey to delivering apps that perform as beautifully as they look, regardless of where you choose to deploy them. Up next, Andrew will talk a bit more about Flutter's robust developer experience and thriving ecosystem. But before we get to that, here's another enterprise team that was really excited about the performance improvements that they saw after moving to Flutter.
Hi, my name is Donghyun Lee. I work on Flutter on Edge WebOS DB. On WebOS, as its name suggests, most apps are web app. A web app is very efficient to develop, but not very efficient when it runs. It's slower to launch and uses a lot more memory than a native app. A native app is the opposite. Efficient to run, difficult to develop. So we always wanted a technology that was efficient both for development and execution. Back in 2021, we noticed Flutter was a very promising new technology. We ported Flutter to WebOS DB and wrote a sample application. Its performance was beyond our expectation. After experimenting it for a real application, TV Guide app for Japan, we decided to ship it in products. Now, our customers in Japan are using the Flutter app every day. With the success of the first app, we are expanding Flutter usage in WebOS DBs. In 2025, Flutter will be used for key applications in WebOS DB globally. Adopting Flutter on WebOS wasn't as simple as developing a Flutter application for a smartphone. We had to port the Flutter engine, write plugins to show TV broadcast, to play video, and so on, to use Flutter on our platform. Internationalization was another big area where we put our efforts, and we still need to put more. However, we feel that it was a great decision to adopt Flutter. Efficiency in terms of CPU and memory usage is a key factor for the success of our business. Another benefit we are expecting is you can port Flutter-based smartphone apps to WebOS DB without too much effort. We are glad to join the Flutter ecosystem and hope we will contribute to make the wonderful technology even more wonderful. Thank you.
Flutter has evolved to a thriving ecosystem that powers a host of apps across industries. This evolution has been driven by people and the tools that empower them. From day one, we've been obsessed with crafting an unparalleled developer experience and fostering a vibrant developer community. Flutter development is fully supported in VS Code, Android Studio, and IntelliJ IDEA, providing development teams with a choice of IDEs for a productive workflow. Stateful hot reload is a signature Flutter development experience feature. It does away with the tedious development cycle of saving changes to code, waiting for the app to recompile, navigating back to your place on the app, and finally seeing your changes. With stateful hot reload, you instantly see a change the moment you save. It transforms minutes-long development loops into sub-second iterations. This seemingly simple feature has a profound impact, not just on development speed, but on the developer morale too. Flutter DevTools, built with the power of WebAssembly, offers rich debugging, profiling, and inspection capabilities. The new Flutter Inspector in DevTools makes UI debugging of even large, complex apps a breeze. And let's not forget Dart, the language that powers Flutter. Its co-evolution with the Flutter framework is a huge advantage, allowing us to deliver features like sound null safety, advanced concurrency. We believe in sweating the small details too, which all add up to significantly improved developer experience and more robust, reliable, and readable code. The tooling and language features have enabled teams like Universal to see 44% faster release cycles since migrating to Flutter, and Xiaomi Auto, an electric vehicle manufacturer, to deliver their new car companion app with a team of 4 to 5 people. Let's look at pub.dev, our package repository. It now hosts over 50,000 packages, connecting developers with pre-built production-grade solutions, including front-end solutions for data visualization and multimedia playback, monetization solutions like video ad integration with interactive media ads, and payment processing with Google's in-app payments, Braintree, and Stripe, and even back-end solutions like cloud compute integration with Firebase and app performance monitoring with Sentry. Any developer or organization can contribute to either new packages or to existing packages on pub.dev. This open ecosystem fosters community-driven quality and longevity. Flutter's community-driven spirit also extends to the framework itself. Since Flutter 1.0, we've had over 1,400 open source contributors to the main Flutter repo. That's more than 1,400 passionate developers shaping the future of Flutter. Beyond the framework, package ecosystem, and tooling, a rich ecosystem of production-grade solutions and services has emerged around Flutter. Flutterflow, for example, offers a low-code approach to building Flutter apps, accelerating development cycles. Shorebird's Code Push service allows Flutter developers to push app updates directly to users' devices. Serverpod provides a robust and scalable solution for writing server-side code in Dart. And Codematic's CI/CD solution streamlines your Flutter build, test, and release pipeline. Of course, Flutter also works with other common CI/CD solutions, like Jenkins. This breadth of support ensures that you have the resources you need to succeed with Flutter, no matter your project size or complexity. We've also invested in building open source toolkits that bring together project templates, customizable widgets, packages, and documentation for building with Flutter, including our casual games toolkit to accelerate building 2D games with Flutter, such as card games or platformers, and our AI toolkit, which helps you build and integrate AI features into your Flutter app by providing customizable AI integration components. For those looking for expert guidance, our global network of Flutter consultants, listed on flutter.dev, provides tailored support wherever you are in the world. This vibrant ecosystem, coupled with seamless integration with services like Firebase, makes Flutter a top choice for building production-ready apps for any screen at scale. It's the reason why so many developers and companies are choosing Flutter in production.
Hi, I'm Diego Garcia, a senior software engineer at Superformula, and we partnered with MGN Resource to support the MGN Rewards app. Today, I want to share you some insights on how Flutter has supported our enterprise-level development. We maintain an ambitious schedule of 24 releases per year, driven by a team of 40 Flutter developers across 7 front-end teams. We've been using Flutter since an initial launch in August 2020. One standout feature is how easily we integrate native code, both with community plugins or custom-made, enabling us to develop complex functionalities like digital room keys without any limitations. Flutter documentation has also improved greatly over the last few years, which we noticed while recruiting and onboarding new developers. This has made it easy for new team members to find a single source of truth, get up to speed quickly, and contribute effectively. Our core values in development are community, speed to market, and stability. Flutter's single codebase supports this by enabling rapid development across multiple platforms. Beyond the mobile app, we've been able to reuse much of our codebase for web-based tools for employees and Kiosk app for tablets. And Dart Unified Language has also inspired us to explore writing some server-side code in Dart, potentially reusing some data layers, further streamlining our architecture. Flutter has been a powerful tool for building and scaling the MG Rewards app, helping us deliver consistent and efficient experiences. If you're considering Flutter for your projects, I hope these insights help you guide your decision. Happy coding!
So far, we've shared how Flutter has grown from an experiment to a production-grade app framework. We enable development teams behind some of the world's biggest apps and brands with a first-class developer experience, and help them focus the resources they have on delivering amazing user experiences across all platforms with great performance. But there's one more thing, or actually a number of things. As we move forward in Flutter's production era, it's essential that we continue to make developers more productive in delivering even higher quality apps. Each year we publish a roadmap that defines where the framework is headed. So here's 3 things that I'm especially enthusiastic about in Flutter's future. But first a note, just like a band, we do a lot of jamming on new ideas in the Flutter team. Throwing riffs around, building up drum beats, testing out lyrics. And while some of that hits tape, and maybe even ends up on an album, it's an inherent part of the ideation process that some ideas fail. So as I tease some of these items from the lab, please keep in mind that some of this will probably turn out to not really work. And some of it will end up looking quite different by the time it hits the radio waves, or in our case, the stable channel. Kate talked about helping teams craft innovative apps across the broad ecosystem of devices out there. Andrew and Rivers shared in the opening that more than 1 in 4 apps in Apple's App Store use Flutter. Quite impressive, I think. Let's look at our plans for supporting developers who are shipping apps to iOS. We're giving our Cupertino widgets, which match Apple's design language and specifications, a massive overhaul with new features and functionality, so that users on iOS will feel right at home. We're also upgrading the framework to recent Apple ecosystem standards, such as replacing CocoaPods with Swift Package Manager. It's our vision that Flutter enables everything you can do in Swift UI, but while still allowing you to deploy your app to all the platforms and devices that your customers use. We're also investing in tooling improvements. To enable teams to iterate even faster, we're designing a live widget previewer. This lives right in the IDE and can render individual widgets without needing to run the whole app. We're also investigating support for visual editing of widget properties, again directly from the previewer. We believe this improves productivity, makes UI development even more approachable, and will blur the lines between developers, designers, and product managers. Of course, interesting apps do a lot more than just painting pixels. They need to take advantage of the APIs and services available on the host platform. Today, this either means finding a ready-made package on our pub repository or writing cumbersome host bridging code using platform channels. We're investing a lot in a new approach for this, which we call direct native interop. Our vision is to enable a simple and seamless mechanism for calling into platform native APIs. Directly from Dart, whether the APIs are in C, Swift, or Kotlin. Say, for example, you want to prompt a user on Android to authenticate with a biometric, such as face or fingerprint recognition. With direct native interop, you can write Dart code that calls directly into the Android X APIs. All the underlying Dart classes for mapping the host biometric APIs to Dart would be handled automatically. The local auth plugin already supports biometric authentication, but say this is a new API that's being introduced and we haven't yet done the work to build up these plugins. With direct native interop, you can write this Dart code from day one by calling directly into the APIs. There is still a lot of work to validate that this approach will work end to end, but we're making progress and are actively testing it by porting some of our own plugins. We're hopeful that this can deliver a step change in productivity when it comes to platform interop. We're also dedicated to maximizing developer productivity, so we're exploring a few new ideas to make Flutter code quicker to write and easier to read. First up, we're prototyping what we call decorators. These are API shorthands for styling your widgets, for example, to specify alignment or colors. The code example shows 3 concise method calls that decorate a button by adding some padding, a blue border, and centered alignment. We're also exploring a number of other Dart features. These include enum shorthands, which abbreviate a bunch of common Flutter code patterns where enum types are repeated in the API calls, such as when setting alignment, and primary constructors, which drastically reduce the overhead of defining smaller classes, for example, a point data class. As I mentioned, these are just a few examples. We're exploring dozens of other potential improvements in this space. It's been a long and exciting journey for the Flutter project. We continue to do our best to revolutionize multi-platform app development, to making developers and teams an order of magnitude more productive, and to disprove theories that multi-platform frameworks imply lower app quality. We've now reached Flutter's production era, and we have a deep and nuanced focus on supporting the millions of developers and teams that deliver mission-critical apps to users across the globe. We've seen a tremendous ecosystem grown around Flutter, and I'd like to personally express my gratitude and appreciation for all the members and contributors of this vibrant ecosystem. We could not have done this without you. If you're not already using Flutter, we'd love to see you join us too. And we could not be more excited about the future. Now back to our wonderful hosts, Rivers and Andrew.
All right, time for some Q&A. In a few minutes, we'll be taking your questions live and directing them to leadership on the Flutter and Dart teams. In the meantime, though, since Rivers has been nice enough to join us, I thought we'd do a little Q&A right here.
Excellent.
All right. So I know you noticed the little boombox earlier when we were taking a break.
Very cool. Brings me back.
Yeah. It's got a kind of Grandmaster Flash look to it. And so that's actually running Flutter right now on a Raspberry Pi, I believe, and then a little LCD screen.
Yeah, mind-blowing.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of community folk. You know, Flutter supports 6 platforms officially, but there are folks in our community who do experiments all the time to see what they can get Flutter running on. I saw somebody that was doing an alarm clock yesterday. They posted to Blue Sky about it.
Oh man, I got to get into this.
Yeah. So Roman Jaquez, he seems to get more work done as a side project than I do, despite working for the Flutter team full time. But yeah, it's one of the fun parts about the SDK. Like, we're all surrounded by a bunch of glowing rectangles, and so why can't you run Flutter on whatever glowing rectangle you want?
Yeah. So what does it do?
It streams music.
It streams music.
It streams music. And so, yeah, we were listening to a Rivers Cuomo solo track earlier. And so we have it turned off because licensing music is no joke. So this is one of my questions. I was planning on slipping this in later, but I was curious about how you interact with the community. I know, like, is there a GitHub account called Goat Punishment that you use to kind of hide your identity a little bit?
No, actually, yeah, when I started in 2015, just programming in general, I started with an online CS course.
Oh, cool.
And at the time, I had no habit for like being part of an online community, and I was very private, and I didn't take advantage of like the online tutors or Discord or Facebook groups, any of that. I was just totally on my own, and I really suffered. Then I discovered Stack Overflow, and I went, that place was a little bit intimidating, and you know, sometimes people are rough in there if you're a newbie like me. But eventually I've come to feel like, oh, this is pretty safe, and I just like, I have the literal picture of myself on the cover of the Blue album as my GitHub picture.
Oh,
and
wow.
Account name Rivers Cuomo, and
Okay.
Nothing bad has happened. Everyone's been really cool, and if anything, I've gotten some extra help from fans who come on, like, you know, experienced programmers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been great.
That's really cool. I'm glad to hear it. The community is the best part of developing with Flutter. We're very lucky to have the folks, again, around the world that we get to work with. And it's very motivating for me.
Yeah, and Felix Angelov is Flutter Block, right? And Very Good Ventures, yeah.
He's actually moved on from VGB, by the way. He's at another company called Shorebird right now.
Oh, yes, actually, I've seen that name too. I didn't quite understand what they're doing, but he was always like so helpful and nice with Flutter Block, and like, why is this guy being so nice? What's in it for him? I don't quite understand it. Coming from a musician background, where there's a sense of community between all the different bands and stuff, but you wouldn't be like open sourcing your song, like, here, come take this part of my song and use it, and you're good luck, have a hit.
Yeah, it's just all public domain. Enjoy. Yeah. Do people sample your stuff, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, not so much artists from our generation, but new artists, like sampling is a big thing, or interpolating, where, oh, I like that chorus, let me use that chorus in my song.
Got it.
I'll cut you in, that kind of thing.
I'm at the age where people are now remaking things from when I was a kid, and those people can all get off my lawn. So you mentioned when you sort of got started learning, are you a learn by doing person? Are you somebody that would like read docs, or do you like videos or those sorts of things? Like, how did you sort of approach the task of learning what Flutter was?
Definitely learn by doing. Yeah, I just dive in, try to make something, and back then it was Googling and Stack Overflowing. Now it's LLMing or whatever I don't know what the
Ask
verb
Gemini is what we would say.
Ask Gemini.
Livestream.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, what are you working on right now? Like, if you opened your IDE at home, like, what would be on the number one on the recent projects list, so to speak?
Well, I have my big projects and then my recent projects. Like, my biggest project is called Weezify, and it's the interface is like it's like a Spotify like music streamer.
This is Mr. Rivers' Neighborhood. You can get to it online, right? Through a web browser?
Yeah, it's a web app and iOS and Android. It's called Weezify now. But it has just my demos, thousands of them, like 4,000 of them. And
wow.
yeah, I've accumulated over like 30 years I've been making demos.
Yeah.
So the fans can stream my demos through this Flutter app. It's really cool.
Oh, cool.
And I'm also now like the lead developer maintainer of a meditation app called Dhamma.org, which I think is used by over 1 million people worldwide. And I didn't build it, but I'm, try to fix bugs without introducing new bugs and introducing new features. Like I just added a dark mode.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it always starts with a web app for me. In Firebase, that's you guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're sort of a sibling team for us.
Yeah. It's just so quick to get things up and running, and it looks pretty pro, and I can impress myself if no one else. And and then I go into my Discord server and see how the fans are reacting and keep evolving it, and eventually things can go to the mobile apps too.
Okay. You mentioned Discord. So Firebase, I was kind of curious. You had talked about Felix and how much you enjoy using Block. I was curious, are there any other sort of libraries in the ecosystem that like Weezify, you have to be using some kind of audio library.
Yeah,
right?
So many of my apps use just audio, which is incredible.
How have you seen Flutter change in the time that you've been using it, or seen the Flutter community change? If you've been around for 5 years, you're kind of an old hat at this point.
Well, I came in right around the change to null safety.
Oh, wow. That would have been an interesting time to show up.
Yeah. I just feel like bit by bit, things have gotten more like cooler and more professional, and like widgets are a little slicker and flashier, and just more fun stuff to play with.
I think that might be a common reaction, just because we sort of, Flutter's original vision was to go to 6 platforms. And this was, so you have web, iOS, Android, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. And when we got to that point, it was like, well, what do we do now?
Right.
And so a lot of
everything cooler.
Right. Yeah. A lot of the work now is like, how do we just make everything to the point that it just works?
Yeah.
You don't have to mess with it, that it sort of just works out of the box, so to speak. Oh my goodness. So awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of this and for answering some questions with us. I hope it's been fun for you.
It's been amazing.
All right. And thank you again for being part of our developer community. Woo! All right. That does it for our Q&A here. I'm going to turn it over to our live Q&A featuring leadership from the Dart and Flutter team answering your questions.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the live Q&A, Dart and Flutter leadership answering your question. My name is Craig LeBenz from the Flutter Developer Relations team, and I'm joined today by Todd Volker, the Director of Engineering for Flutter, by Michael Thompson, the Group Product Manager for Dart and Flutter, and John McCutcheon, who we on the Flutter team at Google affectionately referred to as the Uber Tech Lead of Flutter. Todd, Michael, John, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here.
All right, great. So we asked on socials a few days ago for folks to submit their questions. We've polled a few. Depending on time, we may or may not be able to get into some additional live questions that have come in through the stream today, but let's just kick it off and get into those questions that we polled over the last few days.
Sounds great.
All right, first one. Could you share some of Flutter's roadmap for the next 2 to 5 years so I can sleep good at night? That's a great question. Who wants to take this one?
I would love to speak to this. I don't know that I have recommendations on sleep, but in terms of the roadmap, we are investing a lot in making Flutter a great fit for building apps for the iOS platform. We are adding even more Cupertino widgets, which are our widgets that use sort of a Apple-inspired design language. We are working on a few tooling features for this area, and then integrating with standards like the Swift Package Manager. Then there's another huge initiative, which is interoperability. So the ability to, from Dart code, directly to call into other programming languages, whether it's something like Kotlin or Swift or C. And I think this is an area we're going to see a lot of advancements in over the next year or two. Something I'm very happy about myself. And then lastly, we're pushing a lot on sort of the very low levels of improving Flutter UI code itself, making it easier to read, easier to write. This involves a bunch of work across the Dart language team, looking at potential new language features. We're investigating things like the constructor syntax and removing some of the duplication in how you invoke some functions. We're also looking at some of the APIs themselves in the Flutter framework. So just a general push on making it really pleasant to read and write code.
Great. Yeah, of those, the ones I'm most excited about, definitely direct native interop. I think that'll also just free up a lot more time for sleep. So it should help all of us. Okay, question number 2. Can we expect Flutter WASM soon working on Safari now that Apple has announced support for WASM GC on Safari 18.2?
I could probably take this one. So yeah, our goal is to get to WASM on the web 100% throughout. Right now, we're working with Apple and the WebKit folks. There are a couple bugs that we've been monitoring that allow us to run in a performant way, whereas right now it's too slow. So we're experimenting with the newest version of Safari and checking it out. And as soon as it's all ready to go, we are certainly going to turn that on.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely great to have full coverage of all browsers. All right, next question. Are there any plans for releasing a Flutter-specific IDE? Spicy.
Oh, good question. So we do a lot of work in tools today. We have a CLI that you can combine with any IDE of choice. We provide these integrated experiences with our plugins across editors like Android Studio and VS Code. And we've quite aggressively built out our diagnostics and debugging suite in Flutter DevTools. So I don't know that we're about to go build a full IDE, but we're quite interested in partnering with anyone that might be interested in working with us.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Okay, next question. When are you going to add call span and row span to the table component? All right, I love this one, very specific. One thing, whoever asked this, I would direct you to the two-dimensional scrollables package. There's a lot of different table widgets out there in the framework in different packages. The two-dimensional scrollable package is maintained by the Flutter team, has a bunch of great table widgets, and includes the call span and row span attributes, which, of course, extremely valuable and important. Anyone else have anything on that, or are we good? All right, we'll move on to the next question. All right, after Impeller, what is Flutter's next big swing feature?
I'll take that one, Craig. Michael's already sort of talked about it a bit, but we are investing heavily in making it real easy to call native APIs. So if you want to use, say, an Android API that was released yesterday in some new Android SDK, you'll be able to do that directly from Dart. And that should dramatically simplify how you access native code in Flutter, and then the latency that in time to access new native features.
Yeah, and to be clear, you can always access a day one API today. This will just make it a lot smoother for the developer. You'll basically just have an import at the top of your Dart file. There's no method channel, no code generation step. You're just up and running immediately.
We're removing a lot of cognitive complexity from that a Flutter developer has to consider when they access native features, and it's going to feel a lot simpler.
Nice.
I'll just add that one of the parts that goes with that is also running on the same thread as the native code as well. So traditionally, not only have there been platform channels, but you have to do a thread hop, and that makes it a little bit more tricky. And we're removing that thread hop and making them all run on the same thread too.
Should be good for performance too.
Yeah, once we stop the thread hops and passing messages in string form back and forth, we'll definitely save some cycles.
Right. Okay, great. Well, that continues to be one of the features that I'm personally most excited about. So get back to work, John. All right, next question. Can we expect to see Flutter Web using Web GPU?
I can speak to that one. So our goal here is to expand the use of Impeller. So we've got Impeller running on iOS, as we now talked about. It's now the default on Android. We're working on desktop. We're experimenting with Impeller on the web as well. No promises here. It's in the early days. But the plan there is to deliver Impeller everywhere. And then whether or not we use WebGPU or WebGL as kind of the backing layer to Impeller on the web is just an implementation detail. The point is we'll get to Impeller.
All right. Next question. How is the process on 3D rendering without WebView, but with Impeller?
I can answer that one. So with Impeller, we are starting to preview the package Flutter GPU, which is a low-level API that will allow you to render any 3D scene that you'd want. You could build a first-person shooter. You could build something that displays a product that you want to sell. But the API is low-level. It's comparable, but not exactly the same to like OpenGL or Vulkan or WebGPU, as we were just discussing. On top of that, though, we also have an experimental package called Flutter Scene, which allows you to take a standard model that was modeled in, say, like Blender, and display that as a widget inside of your Flutter app. And so lots of work is happening there, and this all sits on top of Impeller, which is another reason why we need to get Impeller everywhere, so that we can get Flutter GPU and Flutter Scene everywhere.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be a brave new world when full 3D stuff comes to Flutter. I saw a lot of Flutter GPU comments in the chat, so that's great. Okay, I think that is the last of the pre-selected questions. So now we're venturing into the great unknown of questions that you have asked during the stream. Okay, let's see here. What is the best way for engaging animations in Flutter? I think probably many of us could comment on this. Is anyone particularly interested? I certainly can.
Go for it, Craig.
All right, I'll take it. Yeah, so engaging animations in Flutter, I think, is, obviously implicit animations are there, animation controllers are there. Implicit animations are not necessarily terribly engaging. So the Flutter Animate package is a place where I personally love to go for tightly scripted. You can nicely stagger animations with the Flutter Animate package, and you can just perform, you can put a lot of really nice polish on transitions in your app using that package. Of course, if you want even the next tier of engaging animations, a thing I often think of is like when you launch the Discord app, that little way the logo of the Discord logo kind of spins around and kind of flashes in and out of existence. I would reach to Rive for something like that. Of course, Lottie and others are also great candidates, but those are my personal go-to tools for engaging animations in Flutter.
Yeah, I would just add, just building on that, I think it rhymes a lot of what you just said. Hero animations, in my experience, are a really good way to build engaging experiences where you have the same widget persists across different screens and has a nice animated transition. I think it really makes for better user experiences.
Yeah, and that's been in since Flutter 1.0. That was there when I started in Flutter a long time ago. And it's one of the kind of few design patterns in mobile apps that hasn't really gone out of style. So I think a hero animation is still, classy in an app. So yeah. Okay, next question. Oh boy, that's small font. Okay, I'm going to do my best. When did you get the... Well, where did you get the 1/4 of apps, Apple Store apps are coming from Flutter? What is the stat for React Native? This is really small text, guys. And can you expand on that stat? This is a really surprising stat, and I'm very curious. Okay, that is a great question. And does anyone have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. This is a number we got from app intelligence company Apptopia. They have a data platform where they analyze all the new apps that are being published to both the App Store and Google Play. And then they go and they find those apps and they analyze the SDKs that are being used inside. And we work with them to get an understanding of how much Flutter is being used. And that's where the number's coming from. And we'll have a few more details about this, the blog post going out on our blog shortly.
Yeah, I think that one thing about that too is that there's an assumption, as you saw in the Rivers Cuomo, Q&A, that the number is much lower, not just for Flutter, but kind of across the spectrum of different options. And I think one of the things we're highlighting in this event is Flutter has incredible momentum in the industry. And it's gotten to the point now where we will frequently hear of large companies come to us having already evaluated, decided, and close to launch in Flutter. Whereas in the early days of Flutter, we would be working with them kind of hand in hand. They would nowadays blog about it sometimes before we've even, heard that they're using Flutter.
Yep.
So there's a great number of companies that are out there using Flutter, and I think the Apptopia data just, shines a spotlight on that.
Yeah, I stumble into new Flutter apps almost every week, just in the apps that I use myself, and that's a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question. Okay, ask Flutter, will the new decorators be the new approach to Flutter, or can we choose to use the approach we want? That's a great question. I think I can just very comfortably say, we're not going to deprecate any widgets, but Michael.
Yeah, so first of all, anything we talk about in the roadmap section is, as we mentioned, somewhat experimental, right? We always explore a bunch of different approaches, we evaluate them, we run user studies. So we don't know exactly what this feature may look like when it ships yet, because we are still experimenting. But yes, if we do it, it'll be in an incremental way where you can choose to use it if you want, and you can choose not to if you prefer the current syntax.
Yeah, one of the benefits of Flutter is that you can step into the code and really understand what's going on. So we've made specific design choices over the life of the framework to not make anything kind of, compiler magic or hidden away in a way that you can't see what's going on. So in the case of decorators, they'll be optional. And if you go look at what they're doing, it'll be easy to understand code as to how they're using the existing APIs.
Yeah, right. They're going to be methods that add another widget or something like that, and you're just going to realize, oh, this is exactly what I was doing before, but I typed less, something like that. Yeah. Yep. Okay, next question. Are there any challenges when bringing widget preview? I think I read that right. Yes. Are there any challenges when building out this widget preview feature? How's it going?
Again, it's very experimental. There's actually a bunch of challenges here. And I think there are both technical challenges we would have to solve and UX challenges to go and solve. So for now, this remains something we're exploring. I'm personally very, very happy with Hot Reload, and I think it's an immense impact on Flutter, and I think it will continue to have so. And even if we go ahead and add another feature, they would live as a pair.
Yeah, and I would also, in the web, there's a great tool, Storybook.js, and Flutter has a comparable product out there called Widgetbook. And that's also a nice way, kind of as a stopgap before widget previews arrive, though there wouldn't really be in direct competition. But Widgetbook also, I think, is a strong option for getting that quick, isolated preview and quality assurance flow around a specific widget. Because obviously, Hot Reload is great, but to look at one specific widget, you probably have to see it in its entire environment, in the page that it lives on, and Widgetbook can also help with that. Okay, next question. All right, will you start officially supporting embedded systems at some point, like interacting with work from Sony, Toyota, or Flutter Pi?
I can answer that question. This is something that we're actively looking into, and we are starting to look at what changes we will have to make to the Flutter code base in order to support that. Because it is a great use case, and we'd love to see more people embed Flutter in their custom environments without having to fully fork Flutter.
And to what the shape that'll look like is not that the Flutter team will own the code for Sony or Toyota or Raspberry Pi. What we're looking at doing is trying to provide extensibility points where we can have partners come and say, hey, if I want to allow people to develop for Toyota, how can I plug into Flutter in such a way that developers can say, oh, now I want to build this for Toyota?
Yeah, there's glowing rectangles all around us, as Andrew said. So we don't want to preclude Flutter from running on any of them. All right, next question. All right, when are we going to have Dart be used for more than just Flutter? Are there any plans to push Dart in other areas? I can't quite read those last words, but I think that's the question.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. You can already today use Dart for many more things than just Flutter. And as a matter of fact, we do that ourselves. We use Dart extensively for scripting and testing, and we even use it for something like pub.dev, which is a full package repository. We run the backend on Dart. And we are doing quite a bit of collaboration with a number of community members that are building out support for things like backend and servers for Dart. I think we'll continue to see this broaden. I don't see us taking the whole space. I think it's very important that we collaborate with the ecosystem here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, next question. All right, this is the final question. And this one's on 3 lines, so I basically can't read any of the words. Would any of you 3 like to read this question?
Is there a target maximum delay for upgraded widgets of a design system? Like when iOS introduces changes, do you have a target time span to ship those changes with the next Flutter release?
I can take that. In general, we base what we work on at any given time on customer value. So I think in general, we want to minimize this time span, but there's not an arbitrary time limit that we say, we'll always have it on, X days after or whatever. Because within that, there's always a spectrum of these widgets are more important than that one. And even within upgrading a design system, we'll have a rollout, as you can see with, Material 3, which is a very broad set of widgets. So in general, I think as soon as possible, but listening to customer feedback about which are the highest priority things is how we're going to prioritize that work.
And if I can just add, one of the huge benefits of Flutter to me is that when you have that support, whether we did it or someone else did, we can carry that support across any platform and any version of the platform that you want to run it on. So in many ways, we actually can go quite more broad than some of the other systems can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
All right, Todd, Michael, John, thank you so much for joining this live Q&A. Thank you to all the other presenters in Flutter in Production. And thank you all for tuning in. It was great to see so many familiar names and faces in the chat. And thank you for participating, being a part of this community, and building and running your Flutter apps in production.